It is November 1st. I can't believe we're there already. That means we're days away from the election. The sugar high is wearing off, and we've got serious issues to talk about, like Kanye West. Should he be able to sing about Jesus? But we're not getting to that for just
the rage.
all the rage these days. This is Greg's contribution to the podcast today.
This was a topic I want to explore.
But we're going to make you wait for it. We're not going to talk about that because there's a couple other things that are a little bit higher ranked.
Like Jesus, that's why.
I would not argue that that's the truth, but we've got an impeachment vote going on, mail-in ballots sitting on people's countertops. We've got people just dumping beer down the drains that we can't drink anymore. Twitter says no more political ads. And then we have this little problem of the homeless center issue that has not exactly fixed itself. So a lot to talk about. I want to start, though, with the impeachment vote. Our Utah congressional leaders, we have 4 of them. They all voted along party lines. Ben McAdams might have been the only one where people were wondering what he would do, but he voted with Democrats, saying that he was keeping his mind open. Maura, you're nodding your head here. Were you surprised at all by the fact that we went down party lines, or is this exactly what you expected?
So this is a vote about a process, right?
Correct.
This isn't a vote to impeach. This is a vote to start the public process that Greg has been clamoring for a while.
Right.
So I wouldn't be surprised if he were in the position to vote yes, because now it opens it up to the public, and we get to hear these witnesses. And I think McAdams is right, and when he says, hey, let's continue the process, I think opening it up to the public, going through it, whatever side you're on, this should be a good thing.
I am hopeful this is a process that keeps moving, though, and does not turn into grandstanding. That's the one thing I hate about open process, because I love having open hearings, but open hearings, Greg, as we all know, sometimes turn into either side of the party, but we'll just think back to the last U.S. Supreme Court nomination in Kavanaugh. Everyone's there to make their point, and they say their 2 minutes of whatever, and then they follow up with a little question they don't really care about.
You know what? But the point of that is that bad behavior would be on display. However you would watch a hearing like that, and the people would be there to see it. What you've had so far is a closed hearing. You've had the minority of the House of Representatives that have been excluded from being able to subpoena witnesses, or there's even accounts, we don't know because we haven't watched it or have been able to see it, but there are accounts where the chairman is actually directing the type of questions or what questions may be asked, which is outside the usual purview of a chairman. And I think that when you don't know and you can't see, and you're getting these kinds of stories coming back, it's not going to create a more credible process, or I think confidence in the people. That they're going to go to their sides. They're going to go, and people that hate Trump are going to say it's all fine, and the people that support the president are going to say it's a scam. Process is not a box to check. It's not a curtsy. It's not a hat tip. It's not a distraction from the issues at hand. It is the only way that I know in a political body to get to the truth, or do it in a way where substance has the potential to rule the day. If you have a vote and you have those that would be inclined to support this president or would want to give him the benefit of the doubt, but they're able to subpoena witnesses at the same time those that are looking at investigating him are as well. I think in a public hearing, you could hear those different witnesses or questions being asked, and I think you get to the bottom of things. You get to the bottom of what's happening. That's not what we have now, and even that vote, there are caveats to this process that's supposed to be more open. Adam Schiff is the chairman. It requires a majority of those on the committee to allow the Republicans to call a witness. The majority are Democrats. So it is the way that those rules have been placed. They're better, arguably, than the ones we had where we didn't have any rules before. But it is still not the same process that we have seen in the occasion of President Clinton, President Nixon, or President Andrew Johnson in 1860s. I didn't see that. Senator Howard Stevenson
did.
Those weren't
the same process.
He saw those, but I
mean,
didn't see
they
that.
had the same kind of nuanced differences, and I think the Republicans are really focusing on process because they don't want us to focus on the substance of the matter.
Process is how you get to the bottom of it.
And Greg, these are going to be. I mean, these are going to be open. We're going to be able to judge for ourselves. This is not a deep secret state. And the facts at hand are true. And the one thing that's interesting about this impeachment discussion that is markedly different than any other that we have, if we go back to the age-old mantra that it was the cover-up, not the crime, right? Both Nixon and Clinton were engaged somewhat in impeachment about the entire, not something they did, but something that happened along the way, in instances covers up and lying, and that was what the discussion was, about when did that dishonesty and lack of transparency happen. What's interesting about this impeachment is it is actually firsthand to the president. It is about the behavior of the president. Again, whatever side you're on, it's a slightly different setup. We're not talking about months of things that happened, and you look at Watergate and why Watergate took so long to unfold. I mean, this is interesting because we're judging the direct behavior of the president.
And Maura, I hope you're right. I hope that what you're describing is what we actually see, because what I would love to see is if we had 5 people privy to the president's conversation with the president of Ukraine. If right now you may hear from one relevant person, but what would it be like if we heard from more people that were privy to that same conversation, and you heard different perspectives as to whether that was quid pro quo or not, or whether those transcripts that we've read, that I've read and do not read it as quid pro quo, but I've been told, and it's been said in some of these closed door hearings, that they could have been edited. I would like a full scope of people who have direct knowledge to, under oath, explain what happened
and
there.
we do look at life differently, each of us, yeah.
Absolutely,
Sure.
and I think the confidence or the conclusions would be stronger if we could see some of that instead of what I feel is going on, and that is where you're cherry picking or only one side's picking who they'd like to come and speak or testify. I'd like to see a full breadth of people come and share with what they know.
Yeah, and speaking of full breadth, Representative John Curtis actually has a resolution he's filed. He's hoping to open up everything that's already been done and have that released, but we know that Congress works very slowly. By the time we get that, we might all have like weeks and months worth of reading, but I do hope that all of that's released. We can eventually look at that
Agreed.
too. So there's a lot to look at. One thing also disappointing when we look at John Curtis, he sits on the Foreign Relations Committee, and his committee's been taken out of this, so he won't be one of those people who's doing the questioning. So we're going to watch it closely. It'll be interesting to see how it plays out, and I really hope that even though this is a political process, we can keep it as unpolitical as possible.
That's the part I'm not looking forward to,
Yeah.
because even I took a go at listening to the discussion around the vote, and I took a go at it, and then I was like, I have to turn this off. I can't listen to what is just clear grandstanding already, and this was prior to the vote. So I don't know. I mean, that too, what you said, I'm a little like, I don't know if I can actually in real time listen to our current representatives just staking out inane territory on behalf of their brands.
So we're getting cynical. We're getting even more cynical. I'm going to tell you that of the 3 serious impeachment processes that we've mentioned, they have enjoyed bipartisan support to move forward. This one did not. This had only Democrats that voted to move forward. In fact, the only bipartisan part of that vote would be that 2 Democrats joined the Republicans in voting against it. One side of that coin is, well, we're just too partisan and everybody's putting party above principle. The other side of it is, it's too partisan, and we're not willing to have an open and thorough process, and so we don't approve of it.
Since I don't think this is the last time we'll talk about this topic, I mean, then you add into the fact that we are in the midst and will be more in the midst of a presidential campaign.
Yeah.
So what
And wouldn't
happens
that
when
be
you have
easier
impeachment
just to have
during
a
a
campaign?
campaign? Yeah, I mean,
I
it
know.
would be easier to nominate Supreme Court justices when the sitting president is in. A lot of things would be easier in terms of time.
I know. So I think we have a fully exhausting year ahead of us. This campaign year, we're going to be talking about impeachment. And ultimately, who knows what's going to happen in the next year, because I don't see this happening quickly.
Right.
We may decide this at the ballot box, where a lot of people say it is best decided. And speaking of the ballot box, Salt Lake County voters, I only am checking in on Salt Lake County because we have the big Salt Lake City mayoral race, and I'm assuming other counties are the same. Turnout is not pretty. So, Greg, I'm going to give you these numbers.
Okay.
Let me look here.
By the
I've
way,
got them on my phone.
to our viewers and listeners, this information was not given to me prior to this show.
I like to
Right,
surprise
once again,
people, just like
I have to
the
respond to this
Republicans were
in
left
real
out
time.
of the process because of their unwillingness to speak to
There was
others.
a very partisan
outside the
effort here
caucus.
to provide information
I
to
call-
members of this panel.
I just wanted you to be surprised. But I called Sherry Swenson, and she's always awesome to give numbers. But right now, Salt Lake County, and these are ones that have been mailed in, and at this point, they know they have them. Only 20% of ballots have come back for the entire county. And then you're thinking, okay, well, Salt Lake's got this big mayoral race. It's going to have a lot higher. They're at 28%. That is low, low, low. Are you surprised to see this?
Look, I think that in some ways I am, because it is such an important election and it's one that receives a lot of attention. In some other ways I'm not. But even the concept of vote by mail, it usually when it's changed to a vote by mail in other states, there's a high turnout rate when it's new and it's a new way to vote, and then you see those numbers start to decline over time. But I would tell you, if the numbers stay consistent with what you're describing, it will be the campaign that is most organized and the one that understands how to get out the vote. It will be less about the message or about maybe the candidates, what they bring, and it'll be more about the structure and the team they've built and how they're able to effectively move in a low turnout those that are supporters that they've identified.
Yeah.
So it's a blocking and tackling race if those numbers stay where they are.
So we're about 8 points off of where the end result came for the primary.
So 36,000 people voted around the primary?
And so the one thing we see with vote by mail is it levels off. The first couple elections when you get it, people go crazy, and then voting voters vote and no one else does. So we should see a pretty good dump on election day, but I think by all accounts this is really low. So you're like, why? I mean, there's been a ton of exposure, it's so hot. I do think this is a late breaking race. If you talk to anybody in Salt Lake City, lots of people are going back and forth still. Lots of people are just sort of, I think it's interesting because I think they may like both candidates and they're having a hard time deciding. The other thing that happens in our municipal races, which I think are among the most important, this year is the year where Ogden and Salt Lake have hot races, and then the smaller municipalities do theirs in the secondary in the next 2 years. But it's low. I think it's going to be low, and even if it had a big surge, even if it was a 10-point higher surge, you'd have to say that was a low election.
I think that you're right, because when you look at the favorability, when you're looking at both Luz Escamilla and Aaron Mendenhall, they both have very high numbers in likability and their ability to work across the aisle or do different things. And so I think there's a lot of people who are really invested in this race. They've gone to the debates, they've watched online. I think there's a lot of voters, though, that aren't that, I guess, educated on it. And they're like, well, they both seem nice. And so we've got 20% who are undecided. And so how they fall, I think, is going to decide this election.
Here's just a little campaigns and elections 101 that I think is interesting. We do not have any ballot measures that I'm aware of that are on the ballot in November. Do we have any that are initiatives?
We don't.
No.
Off cycle.
So Karl Rove did this when George W. Bush was president. They tried to put Defensive Marriage Act. They tried to put something bread and butter, something that's very conservative that would really rally a conservative base to get out to vote, to kind of draw people to get them involved. The other side does that as well, where they look at whether it's Medicaid expansion, or they'll look at something that may draw a base, a political base that would create a greater or higher turnout.
Like, could we put marijuana back on the ballot again right now?
Yeah, so what I would say is, when you get into some of these races, sometimes when we see that higher turnout, but we look at an election cycle that doesn't have some of those carrots per se that are out there, we need to take that into consideration too, because sometimes that's why you see a high turnout, because you have some issues, not candidates, that's really designed to draw the base.
Set you on fire.
An interesting thing to that is that, in Salt Lake County particularly, there are many local jurisdictions who have not allowed ballot measures on and off cycle because of that. I mean, they've given cautions about doing it. The other thing that I would remind voters of is these low votes mean you're more powerful. So when people are saying, man, I'm disenfranchised, I could care less, my vote doesn't count, it doesn't matter. The amount of number of races every year that are decided in Utah statewide by less than 100 votes is remarkable every year. So this vote matters, and the smaller the race, the bigger your vote is.
It is so true. We were looking at the primary election and everyone was expecting Jim DeBackus to come through, but really it was coming down to a very small number of votes there at the very end. So we're going to watch it closely. Get your ballots in the mail, postmarked by November 4th. Otherwise, I still like the pomp and circumstance of bringing it on election day and at least dropping it up in the box because you see it's there.
I like the sticker.
I mailed mine because I didn't care as much this year, because there was one city council member with nobody even running against him, so it was like easy to just get her done and get it turned in. But anyhow, please vote. Your vote matters. This one really quickly, I want to mention it because I think it matters coming up in the next election cycle, but Twitter's decided to not let any political ads be on their social media site anymore. They said it's hard to weed out which ones are good and which ones are bad, and they said if you're awesome, you'll go viral anyways. Greg, this one is a stumbling block because you admitted that you're on Twitter, but on Twitter only.
I am like the reverse of Pierre Delecto. I don't participate under a fake name. I have people help me convey messages under my name that I'm not on Twitter,
So
but
you have
I have an
people who
account
tweet for you.
that help me. I own every message I've ever sent, and I know I actually am the author, but I don't have it on my phone. I don't monitor it every day. It's more noise, more distraction. I am on the old man social media.
Facebook, that is where
I am
old
on
people
that.
hang out.
But I don't. Twitter, I've
So-
watched it, and it looks like it just takes more of your bandwidth.
For
so I
political
haven't done it.
operatives, I think this is really nothing. I mean,
Yeah.
Twitter buys are not where the action is. So one thing, so to just parse it too much, you can still buy followers, but you just can't place political ads. So if you're an operative, you're looking and saying, I didn't really use this to place ads anyway because it's such a good place for earned media, non-paid media. You have a prolific candidate, you just have him go nuts on his feeds. The holy grail of misinformation and information, and particularly with women in middle class and middle aged, is Facebook. And so if Facebook changed their policies at all,
And I don't
people
think
would
they're
be,
going to.
They've actually put an exclamation point in response to Twitter saying,
No,
no,
thanks.
we're not going to do that at all. One has to wonder if Twitter, and I would say smartly so, is just really pushing the social media conversation forward at this.
Goading them,
It's
yeah.
not where they get their money. It's not going to hurt them economically. And as an operative, you probably could care less about it. But I love the conversation that they're putting out there saying, oh, social media can have a conversation and an action about what campaigns should and shouldn't be doing. Because another interesting outcropping is, well, can issue campaigns still operate on Twitter? And interestingly enough, Twitter's putting some nuances to what an issue, as Greg said earlier, what an issue campaign can and can't do, and what's political in an issue campaign is sort of different. But that is to say that I love that Twitter is asking the question of where responsibility for public conversations and political conversations lie in social media. It was interesting that the immediate reaction of Facebook, which again is where you put your money. I mean, if you put $500 into Twitter on a campaign, you put 10,000 into
Absolutely.
Facebook, and so that's where people would feel really threatened. And they doubled down and said, we're not touching it, and we're not occupying even an editorial space. We're not going to cull through. We're not going to manage comments at all. We are not going to take any responsibility for the accuracy of the information that is purchased or bought or earned on our surface, on our space.
And we should know, when you're on social media, anything that's been bought and paid for, it says sponsored, you know it. Take it with a grain of salt. As adults know that. And Twitter, like you were saying, it really is a minuscule amount of people who are on that. When you're on it, you think that's where the whole world is, but it's really not. In the end, Facebook is where all of the humans are. Instagram's growing, but Facebook is where most of the people are hanging out. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. But in some ways, I've heard people saying, too, that Facebook might be doing the right thing, because do we want to become the China or the whatever of the world that starts deciding what can be placed on the internet,
Well,
what can
so
and what's there?
To
So
that,
I think
to that point, this isn't the last time we'll ever speak of this, and social media and digital campaigns as a whole. Let's take politics and campaigns and elections out of it. Do we think that sometimes this skews the reality of our young people? Is it contributing to suicide or our efforts for suicide prevention because of the warped realities that people pull down from their feeds and who they hear from and how those are self-selecting to some degree? Once you start deciding, I mean, we're a country of freedom of speech. I mean, it's foundational. But if you're not allowing all voices to be heard, or all of the things that's happening that technology is allowing to happen, what are its consequences? How do we receive information? What's the decisions we make because of it? How much do you want it to be safe? Who's safeguarding it? Whose opinion is it that decides what's right or wrong?
We're not neophytes on
So
this
I
conversation.
think it's complicated.
And
I
yet
think it's going to get...
social media, we act like it's one or the other. I will say, because I take a varying position. I mean, if you haven't read Sorkin, Aaron Sorkin wrote an open letter to Mark Zuckerberg this week, and it's worth reading. I mean, he sort of starts to parse this
Aaron
argument.
Sorkin's like a Hollywood guy. What does he know?
What does he know? And so, but it starts to parse where this line of responsibility is. And so 40% of people in last cycle's election reported getting the base news, the most political news they got from Facebook. Okay, so we know this is now a source. We also know that it is not accurate. It does not follow any journalism. It has no professionalism. And so some of that we love about it, right? But I think this conversation on either extreme, in which freedom of speech has time, place, and manner restrictions already. The United States has had conversations about safety and responsibility and non-infringement, and we're not China in this area. So to say we can't have the conversation at all, I mean, I think we have to start having the conversation, because the amount of misinformation, be it political or be it health or be it just a child's perception of the world around them, is having consequences.
Consequences are important, and I think the problem is it does reach, you mentioned health. This is totally off the political beat, but probably over the summertime, Amazon, Google, Facebook, they started taking down anything that was, instead of pro-immunization, anyone who questioned immunization, a lot of the documentaries and things people are posting. And no matter where you fall on that issue, once you decide on one issue that you're going to stop posting something from one side in a country that values having information, whether some people are putting real or not real information out there, it becomes troubling. So I think it's an interesting
the arbiter
conversation.
of what is true or what is not.
Agreed.
That is what's so complicated.
Yeah.
It really is.
And I want to be able to find stuff on the internet if I want to
If they just
find
ask
it.
me, I could do the whole thing.
They'll find all of it for you.
I can decide it all.
We're
I
gonna
can
get
show
you
you
on
fake
Twitter, and
news
then you can go
versus
crazy.
the real stuff.
All right.
I know it.
If we want to hold your feet to the fire, Greg, this is an issue that I know is near and dear to your heart. There are some major issues going on with the homeless center population right now.
Yep.
There was a question this week of whether or not we should be shutting down the road home when all of a sudden we have hundreds more people than what can be housed in these new centers, which are beautiful. They're doing great work. I think people are loving them that are there. Did the lieutenant governor and his board, there's many people who are working on this decision, make the right decision to make sure the road home closes down and we move forward in the forward direction, getting landlords helping out and other things? Or was this a bad decision? We need to keep it open.
So you got to go back to what the statute had required for the transition to occur, and that was a specific date and an important date, June 30th, 2019. Why was that date important? Because you're in the summer. You have your lowest bed count during that time. That would have given our new resource centers a runway to get used to a new model that provides resources and housing placement in a time where the demand for beds would not be as high. In July, when I began from the cheap seats out here complaining that missing that deadline was going to put the entire effort in peril, there was a lot of eye rolls. They said it's a wet spring. There were a lot of excuses, but I'm going to tell you, we are in the event right now of exactly what happens when you're starting a brand new process or system when the weather has turned. And you're seeing that people are filling those beds and the demand is growing very quickly. A couple things. One of the areas where we're seeing more people coming that need help or are looking for help than have before are females, women. Even if you left the road home open, if you have a women's center, there are people that were shelter resistant that weren't ready to go to the road home necessarily.
It was a somewhat scary place to be.
Because it was scary. That demand is because of that model, and you can't really say if you left the road home open, you're going to meet the need there, because the numbers, and I've seen the math, I've seen the HEMIS numbers from October of 18 versus October of 19, and I'm telling you, some of the overflow that you're seeing is a result of having a new model and having some of these different ways of delivering services and help. It is a false choice. So what I'm saying is there was a drop. It should have happened
close the road
in the
home.
summer.
This is a good
yeah,
idea.
So
okay.
well, this is what I would say. It absolutely should have happened, this transition in the summertime, and that gave everyone the ability to successfully transition. But it didn't. So now what? I believe it's a false choice to say leave the road home open or people will freeze to death and die. Nobody that I know in this space, from the state, the county, or Salt Lake City, will ever be okay with that scenario. There will be places. We have St. Vincent's that has overflow. We have vouchers for motels. 100% will be the case that people that are in need and need shelter will be able to receive that. I think I think the call to people to say, hey, let's get together, let's do this as a community, is the proper one. It's hard to come up with a new model, a new transition if you're leaving the old model there. And there was a lot of fear about staying there or what the atmosphere or environment was there. I have confidence that we are not going to fail people. We're going to make sure that people have a place to stay.
So
but we got to
we're
make
not
that break.
game ready on this. We weren't game ready. We're not prepared, and it's failing the people who need it the most. With caveats that say everyone in this process is earnest, working hard, and smart, right? And this is not the time to blame anyone. Right now, this is a hard problem that we're always going to have.
Yeah.
And so right now is the time for us to not finger point, but to look. But we have to accept that we weren't game ready. So there's a mantra we use at our firm that says most, if not all, political failures are communications failures. And this is an enormous communications failure. I saw Spencer Cox's frustration on Twitter with saying, why would you think I would leave someone in the cold? Of course not. I want to give credit to that, but I also want to say, why did you leave me with that gap of information that appears as though you're not handling business, whoever you are? I'm not pointing that at anyone.
No,
So I do think we've had a huge failure of communication. I also think we didn't transition systems, and I think, if this is going to be a rare nod, this is going to be a rare painful nod to Greg here, and I think one of the things that we're lacking right now is a pointed leader who's going to kick butt and take a little names. I think we have a lot of well-intended people at a table, but we've lost the point of the spear. I'm going to be honest, in which I think who lost the point of the spear that allowed the state to come in is the city of Salt Lake. So one of the things that I'm going to say back to Salt Lake City's new mayor is, please take that back, take the state's support, but kick them out of the driver's seat and have them in the passenger seat, which is where they want to be anyway, because they want to be supportive and the county wants to be supportive, but we have to have a more comprehensive, and that's about leadership. And that leadership is while I'm not indicting the leaders, there's a huge communication drop, and they have dropped the ball right now. I mean, we did see a crisis. I live and work downtown, and we're seeing a crisis still occur. And again, there's no room for finger pointing now. I will say, the plea that says private sector, please step up right now. On one hand, I appreciate it, and on the other hand, I was like, what the?
I know. I'm wondering how that can help, because I'm looking at a state that already has a housing crisis, especially a housing crisis for low-income housing,
right,
where people are on waiting lists. And I'm like, which landlords out there are waiting in line to fill up their apartments that haven't already, that are low income? And then if you take someone who's truly homeless and you put them in an apartment, I mean, you think about a college student, they're always going to some place that's got a bed already, they've got like a microwave in there and a couch to sit on. Can you put someone not near a soup kitchen in an empty apartment with nothing to make food,
Heidi,
and no furniture?
Those are absolutely valid details, and I think they are being worked through. And I think some of that call to find those beds, I think it's the model they're going towards, but now they have to hurry. That model of housing placement, it has a lot of different faces, a lot of different partners. I think that's where that call to arms, or that call to, hey, let's all get together and get this right. It's something that's always been part of the process of how you find the furnished apartments, how you make sure that transitional housing, sober living, treatment beds, how all of that's going to be accommodated
and the Housing
for.
First program was the most successful in the United States for a very long time.
I'm skeptical
and we
of that, only because I
we
don't think there's
discontinued it
wraparound
4 or 5
services.
years ago, right? Well, they
I think it's
didn't
more
hand it
recent
off,
than that.
but that housing service was first class. They just didn't have the services surrounding it. I agree with
Yes.
that, but the housing wasn't the problem.
No.
So, I mean, I will say that it's still the time to not blame our leaders, but give them plenty of room to take action. So that if that's mandatory budget or extraordinary budget measures, or if that is the ability to call a meeting, it can't take 2 weeks to call leaders together and get this going, and they have to move at a faster rate.
Yeah.
Look, and I'm not giving anyone a pass. I think Maura's being pretty fair in this, where we're not going to point fingers or place any blame. But I'm going to tell you this. I'm expressing my confidence that we're going to get this right, but I am disappointed. I am absolutely disappointed that it came to this. I think there were a lot of voices in July saying we are walking into this very scenario, and those voices, including my own, were dismissed. In fact, I found myself being framed as an antagonist, because in July I was saying we're going to hit a moment like this, and it was not well received. It was seen as a hostile voice, which was not my intention, or others that were bringing this up. Am I okay with that? Of course I'm not. I know this will work out, but it didn't have to come to this, and there were steps that could be made, and all the energy that's going to be taken in this month of November to make this right are the same people and the same energy that should have been doing this in May, in June, and even July. It should have been that kind of
But we can't be
focus.
cyclical about it either, because what I fear is we're going to bridge a gap for a group that is in pain right now, but we're not actually going to fill out the structure that needs to happen, because there's a ton of really tough choices that we have to make for a long time, and I have not seen the chutzpah yet to do that.
It'll be interesting to see. The only thing good I can think of that we came to this early cold snap that it made this
It
snap.
brought us up.
It was like, okay, we've got to do something about it. And the good news is we're at the holiday season, and I feel like if you're going to get community support and you need community support, there's a lot of people in the next 60 days who are ready to do kind things and help out in the community. So this is probably a place where you can help. Since we're sort of talking about Christmas and the joys of such things, I'm going to transition to Greg's favorite topic of Kanye West, who sometimes refers to himself as Yeezus. I don't really love that. But he was just in Salt Lake City, had a huge crowd for his Sunday service, and this is kind of his new thing. He's Jesus rock, Jesus rap. What would you call it? And you're loving it?
Yeah, I am. I'm loving it.
Okay.
So I kind of like hip hop, R&B. Remember when Ice Cube was here and he endorsed me? He told everyone to vote for
Word
me.
to our homie Greg.
I'm not even a candidate yet, and he called the shot early. Ice Cube did. I call him Cube. Once you're friends.
Once you're friends, you can just call him
So I
whatever
like
you
that
want.
genre of music. I was with my son, and we were driving, and he likes this music as well. A new album came out by Kanye West, and it's called Jesus is King. And it is very spiritual in nature. It has very positive messages. And where I have seen gospel music, whether it be country music or hip hop, anything that's been kind of in the gospel category has kind of been in its own subset.
It's not cool.
Kanye West is breaking that. He's actually bringing, I think, to young people or people that may like this genre of music, a very, very positive message, and one that you don't hear very often. And I think it's refreshing, and I'm excited about it. And I think that in a time where politics can be so negative, and there's so much partisanship, and there's so much because of Maura, and because there's so much that goes on
Is that what
where we
Jesus
don't
would want
agree.
you to
I
say,
know,
Greg?
I know.
Is
Well,
that
that's
what
why.
Kanye would say?
You know what? That's why I go to church. It's like a hospital. You got to go. People like me need
We're
it.
all going to have to get what would Kanye do rings.
Exactly. So that's why I go to church. Anyway, what I'm saying is where you have, where things may feel so strident or there may be contention, what a great way for Kanye to kind of reinvent himself. Some are skeptical about why, but I love it. I love that there was a revival or a big event, and it was well attended here in Salt Lake City, and he was speaking about things of the soul and the heart and spiritual matters. And now we have this album, and I think it's doing well. And I've listened to the songs, and I like them.
So because
I love
we're
it.
short on
I love it.
time, and because my response to Kanye as Greg's spiritual leader, I just would like to point out that I want to give a product shout out to Budweiser, who brought all their Clydesdales into town.
Boom.
And I mean, this was the best marketing
It was
stunt
a
I've
funeral.
seen.
love my topic.
And they
You're not
did
even
a
responding to my
funeral
topic.
procession with the death of 3-2.
We just went to Kanye to Budweiser.
And I'm just saying that was a lovely marketing moment. So, Bud fan, not Bud fan, they brought the Clydesdale. They came.
Do you
they,
know
they
what would
marked
happen
the
in
death
Pittsburgh
of
if we
Kanye
started
probably
dumping
drinks beer, just so you know.
down the drain?
I
It would be
believe
the
he's
worst.
touched
It'd be
the
black.
spirits.
Oh my gosh!
Right.
Where I grew up in Pittsburgh, it is a drinking town with a football problem. If you took all the beer off the shelves and you were pouring it down a drain, there would be riots. There would be people not good with that. That would
tell you what.
I don't drink, but that seems so wasteful to me. I know that it was the law and how it had to work, but I'm
It
like,
was a little
seriously,
weird.
if we have leftover beer, we can't sell it on clearance. We couldn't have like a nice Halloween party for the homeless and like,
I'm not.
just,
I
get
have
all the
family
extra
members that would
GABC
make that
beer
very
out.
argument. They would not. They would throw their bodies in front of such
It
decisions
was just
like this.
interesting we marked it so much too.
Right?
I just thought that whole part of us being as excited as we are about that
Can I
extra
share-
1% or whatever we're doing.
So the policy behind changing the alcohol content in the beer was that states,
was a
not
business
even
plan.
that
It was a
long
business-
ago,
yeah,
had
no-
so many different
Yeah.
states that had different contents of alcohol in their beer. That is it is
And
becoming
we
more
didn't
uniform.
recognize it because Utah inserted practicalness into their liquor laws, and we were like, "What?
I know,
What are we
so
doing?
nobody
That's
knew.
so
but
weird.
It
That's
was
the
getting
normal
to the
thing
point
to do.
that we were going
Yeah,
to
it
see
was
the
good.
major distributors not be able to provide product to our state because there were no longer enough states of different varying
And a
contents.
secondary outcome may be that, right, that retailers could also choose some market prices. And so this little squeak of market going into the Republican communist system of liquor here, that I kind of dig in that a little, that little wedge right there where the marketplace could
Your beer will
choose.
be more affordable now.
I'm so excited
And the funny
about
thing
that.
is
Too bad I
that
don't
the
drink.
second we said beer, he went away. One of our producers all of a sudden came up to listen to what we were talking about. So I'm glad we saved the big teaser of beer till the end.
I'm sad that Maura couldn't even comment on Kanye. She just went. She segued right
I
into our
said
next
he probably
topic.
drinks the spirits.
He probably drinks
I
a lot.
bridged your topic.
That was good.
I mean,
do you
You
think
proved my point
can
about
Kanye
Kanye,
save
by
our
the way.
country? country. Can he, Maura? Answer this question.
He is who I'm looking towards,
He is.
I think, to
Well,
save
I think
the
there's
country.
I think there's sarcasm in that voice.
Yeah.
I think
I've never been a fan of the Kardashians who are linked to Kanye. The whole insanity of like what surrounds them, I'm not a fan of. You can send me hate mail, whatever you want. But anyone who's willing
I'm
to
with
send
Heidi.
positive things out into the universe, then God bless him. I hope he has great success with it. I think that Justin Bieber and a few other stars have become more open about religion. I don't care what religion, but it probably does us all a little good if
It
we all
is.
stop and ask ourselves, is there, something more important than
there's
myself?
some life lessons going on
Yeah.
there as people
Yeah.
become very successful and have every monetary thing in the world they'd want, and
I
where
agree.
they're turning now.
Yeah.
I think we should be paying attention to that.
So anyhow, we'd like to end this with
Was that just
With the-
too? Was that just too?
with the Kanye song.
substantive and aspirational, Heidi? Should I?
No, I
Should I
actually-
just argue some more?
I unfollowed Kanye on Twitter at some point because I was like, I just can't handle it. But I've actually found myself looking at a few of the tweets lately where he was on, what's that late night show where he sings carpool karaoke?
Oh, yeah.
He did it on an airplane with,
James
James Corden.
Corden.
And he carpool karaoke'd on like a 737 or something
Really?
with Kanye, and they were all singing gospel tunes. And I was like, I'd get on that flight. That seems happy. So
Yeah.
anyhow, I can get on board. Thanks so much for talking tough topics. We'll be back next week following up after an exciting election. Hopefully all your ballots will be going in the mail, and throw away half that candy. You don't need it. Bring it down to the homeless shelters. I bet they need treats. Thanks for listening this week. Subscribe, and we will be talking again same time, same place next week.